So today we're looking at getting the cows back out onto the pasture. It's been pretty wet these past few weeks. Some areas of the pasture have been just completely soggy, and the animals can do quite a bit of damage, especially Smokey, our big cow, um, when it's when it's incredibly wet like that. So I've been feeding them on hay, and wanted to try and get them back out to pasture as soon as possible. Hay's pretty expensive when you don't have your own, and this property is really not set up for that. It'll definitely be a graze, and then I'll have to either get hay from my dad or somewhere else in the valley here. Not that it's exceptionally expensive most years, but it definitely could be cheaper. And we've got the forage grass right now for sure. These last week or two has really come up really well, especially in this paddock here, which is paddock 5, I believe. Um, Actually starting to come up grass heads, and I would prefer not to get too much of that going, get the cows to graze that down. They don't much care for the stems so much as the leaves, so just good to get that managed and down and not have to feed. The goats, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, are pretty timid, but they followed the cows out, which is good. They'll help eat this little patch of blackberries down, and over here there's one. I'm interested to see if they go after the wild rose, just as a curiosity more than anything else. Not a lot of forage specifically for them in the paddock we're about to go out into, but they do eat some grass, and that is fine. When I let them out over onto this one, which is going to be a bit yet, this is the steepest part of the upper paddock pasturage area. I'm going to give another couple weeks. You can see the grass is coming up, but it's definitely behind the rest of the pastures. It was definitely grazed the hardest as well, and right now it sheds water very quickly. Water flows through the soil deeper through much of the year, and then in the summertime it was just bone dry last summer. So, but there is a good patch of blackberries for the goats in this one to work on, and quite a few others as well, which is not surprising if the grass isn't very prolific and not even the weeds are doing great, then blackberries will absolutely take over. So we'll wait a couple weeks on this particular paddock. That's paddock 3. They've already grazed 1 and 2 once this year, and 1's almost ready again. 2 needs another little while. It looks like Mopsy, she's the middle goat, is going after the blackberry shoots, and then uh, the crabapple there, which is totally fine if it gets grazed on those lower leaves and branches. I left them there purposely, almost just for the goats and the cow to munch on. When I limbed up some of the other limbs and kind of tidied up the tree a little bit, but they're definitely enjoying it. And the pasturage here, I'm trying something a little different than the last time I let them out. The goats are just getting out all over the place, and I looking at the way that they interact with the world, it seems to me like their eyesight must be fairly poor compared to the cows. The cows can see an electric fence wire, and they definitely do a good job of avoiding it once they've been trained. Um, the little boys, Chester and Lester, have learned that lesson pretty good, I think, at this point, and Smokey knows what she's doing for sure. The goats, not so much. They'd run into it, and they got to a point there last time they were out on pasture where they would just kind of put their heads down and go straight through it. I only had 2 strands on the bottom, and you can see that I've gone to 3 strands with a pretty tight spacing. All that's electrical. I've probably got 4 miles of electrical at this point. Smokey's gonna follow me down here, just showing her where to go so she knows where the paddock is. She's gonna eat along the way, but the cows will kind of browse selectively and learn what their space is, and the rest of the animals will follow. But I've put flags on this time, little green strips of marker tape that I just picked up at a local store, very cheap, $3 for a roll, and I went through half the roll to do a couple of paddocks in the main stretch here. This is it's kind of an extension of the sacrifice yard, more or less. They'll run this whenever I'm putting them out to a paddock. I'll hold a gate through or fencing through to keep them, you know, to wherever I want them to go. But paddock 3, paddock 4, 5, and I guess this middle one could be 6. All those paddocks are accessed via this gate assembly I have down here, which you can see the higher wire that goes around so I can get tractor through. And right now I've just got two gates up here tied to posts on either side. Ideally in the future I'd have it just be panels, not gates, and I'd have enough to be able to open and close all 4 entries independent. But so far the goats seem to be maintaining a pretty good respect for the fencing wire. I think that those little flags are really helping them see it, make it much more visible, which is exactly as intended, and that's great. It's definitely more expensive than I'd hoped, but not much. Mostly it's the clips to hold the wire to the posts, I think, that increased the price. And we'll just kind of help Smokey see which way she's supposed to go. She'll figure it out, but I want her to be able to, you know, kind of follow me down. That's the pattern we've developed, and I think it's a good one, is just to kind of block off a half an hour or 45 minutes and show them which paddock they're going to. This one is completely new. Once they know what, you know, and I've got the fence up for a longer period and they know what the fences are, they'll just need shown which gates open. But right now this is all new to them. Looking at Chester and Lester the other day, I think that the bigger of the two of them, which is Chester has horns, little horn buds, and I think that he actually didn't get completely deballed when we did that for those 2 boys. I think that the rubber band might have slipped over just the one side, so I'm not sure if he's actually truly a steer or not. And it may be that it may still be that it pushed it up far enough that just the fact that it's not hanging down will keep it too warm for him to be viable. I don't know. So I think we'll make him the first hamburger on legs. Maybe slaughter him 6 months earlier than his little brother. We'll see how we end up going with that, but they're both good boys. So far they're a little skittish, but not too bad, and they're not aggressive at all, and that's perfect. It's just what we want. Obviously the 3 lady goats are not aggressive either. Smokey is not afraid of humans, which is good, and she is not mean, which is good. She'll, you know, kind of come right up to you, which big cow, if you're not around cows very often, can be a little intimidating, but she's a good animal. So that's good. So I'll kind of just walk you along the fence line here and look real quick at some of the future plans. So we're in a paddock that is surrounded by another paddock. It's just an odd shape, that last one. And I'd intended to have it be a little bit different than it is, but the spacing of the orchard for the first year ended up a little bit different than I had thought it was going to be, and so we ended up just making basically this paddock here, which goes down to the neighbor's fence, and actually ends up going all the way down along this line here, along our fence line, until you get over to the orchard over here, and then up the hillside. So I can have them access via a gate that is up here. Kind of see it maybe just barely. As well as down at the assembly over here, the electrical and gate connections. There might be enough pasturage on this plot here that I could run a wire across to the neighbor's fence and separate it out like I'd originally intended and have a full 8 paddocks again for the time being. We don't intend to change that pattern until fall, if we're lucky spring, but probably fall of 2019, or 2020, next year. So, but I think it'd be enough forage to make it worthwhile to split this big paddock. It's bigger than the rest because of the weird shape. Maybe take it off of this post up here. If I run it from that post over to the basically right there where that first greenhouse is, they'd still have this corner up in here, and they'd still have that run, which is 15 foot wide or so, and then a good chunk of pasturage in a very strange shape, especially up in that triangle corner. That'd be a small paddock, and this would be a mid-sized paddock relative to the others. So this one I'm in right now would definitely be the biggest one, but it will this section will change pretty dramatically when we put in the 2020 planting. That piece of orchard will come off of the existing orchard over here, and it will come this way. I'm not positive how far yet. It'll be based off of finance and what we're looking at for what we're able to plant in all at once, kind of like we did this year. You know, a group of purchases. I may try and do more rootstock and graft to keep the cost down. I'll try and plan for that, so I can plant it more aggressively. But at a minimum, this oak tree here this way, and up from the oak tree to the fence that way, not wrapping around the hill at this time. That's not planned. And then probably at least down to here will eventually be orchard down to this fence line. I don't know if that's 2020 planting or not. My guess is not. That's probably 2021. And then this lower portion here, this paddock here, I'm not positive yet whether that will end up being orchard or stay range. I'm thinking it probably will be orchard, and then we'll have the paddocks going up the hillside for the animals and have that be almost a savanna graze. You know, put in some nuts and some other plants of similar nature, provided they don't mind a little bit of wet feed. I got to figure that piece out because that paddock over there is fairly swampy. And then on the far side, way past the house, on the other area, that forest, I will paddock off and selectively cut out some scrubbier trees and open it up a bit more so I can get some grass and make it more savanna style, better for graze, and helps just to make it the appropriate mix for the type of wildlife we want. We don't really want to have skunks or deer hiding in there, coyotes, and they all prefer dense shrub. And things like turkeys don't mind if it's a little bit less dense. We do have a wild turkey flock that spends a lot of time just up here on the hillside under these trees, and it's fairly open up there. It's always nice to see them. They come down off of the bigger forest and visit. So this corner in here, this is the lowest point of the farm, and probably, depending upon what the county says, this is where I want to put the fruit stand. It's down in here. So there'd be an entry right down there in the corner. That spot is almost level to the road, so it'd be easy enough to get a culvert and a driveway up and into there. And then we'd have the stand a ways back from the property line, put up a screen of bushes and small trees to help block the view for the neighbors and help keep the noise down. They ran a nursery, so they're pretty cognizant of what that would look like, and we're happy enough to let us do that, so that's really nice of them. And we'd have my plan is to have a circle, basically, parking up against the structure, parking off to the side, and then the ability to drive through and drive around and easy exit. For the parts of the year where the orchard would be in primary operation, the ground should be hard enough for us to let people drive their cars out of fairways into the orchard. And then as long as they're careful, they should have space to turn around. Maybe not in the first area. Those rows are all ended up being a little bit tighter. I went with true contour in those rows, which I had not realized had the effect of making some of them end up being very tight. The plan was minimum 15 feet, and that area ended up being much more than that, or rather less than that. Some of those rows are 11 feet apart, and that's not enough space for a vehicle to safely go through. And I am still in the process of leveling them out. Um, we did not plan that very well when we had the heavy equipment out here. We should have worked top to bottom and scraped for the row to make the mound, and then scraped down each step by step, and we didn't plan it correctly for that. And as a result, there's some areas that are steeper than I would like, and I'd prefer it being a little more terraced. So I'm working on that slowly now, as I can with my Kubota. So neighbors' donkeys letting us know what's up. So yeah, so this will be the future side of um, the farm stand. And we plan to do some mix of you pick and we pick, and not quite 100% positive on the structure yet. I don't think we'll do a CSA model, although the idea of mixing in a CSA for the we pick portion is definitely appealing. The trick would be, you want to have some variety to that, because CSA is really almost more vegetable oriented, in that you can have a lot more variety in a box at a specific time, with the vegetables, because it's almost more when you start the vegetables when they are ready to go than anything else. They do have a seasonality to them, but it's broader, than the fruit trees. You don't start fruit trees and tell them when to fruit; they know when to fruit. So, but I might look into it and see if it was viable, and if there was an interest, I would absolutely be interested in mixing that. We're very keen on mixing as much as we can as far as different revenue streams for the orchard and the farm. It's really important as a farmer to not rely on one crop. It's really important as a farmer to not rely on one method of production. So this lower area, you can see, this is typical of certain swaths of pasture that we have. It's very low on grass, and very heavy on weeds. And that's partially from overgraze, and partially it's the flow of the water on the hillside. So it's hard here. The ground is barely soft at all, even though it's, a damp portion of spring for Oregon. Then you come up here, even though it's uphill, and you get thicker grass. You can definitely see that it's getting a lot thicker here, taller comparatively. Once you get to the thick stuff, suddenly you're walking in very springy soil, very damp, wet soil. Some places in here, even just yesterday, a little bit today, there's even still some surface water from the last rain event, which it just misted yesterday, so that wasn't enough for more than just moisture on the grass. And that is one of the things that we're going to work hard to correct, is the way the water flows across the property, in particular in the pasturage and the orchard. So the slope, I've been studying very carefully to get a feel and an idea of how the water flows down. And there are parts of the slope where the water comes into the soil and then comes out once it hits a flatter area. It builds up in the lower area and moves off slower. What we're going to be spending a lot of time doing is doing what's called subsoil ripping on contour or close to contour, and And then over at the orchard, you've seen in pictures, and we'll see in some other videos, so I'll talk about it more later, just the terracing and the swale and berm effect helps to slow the water and direct it into the soil so that it really, takes its time in getting off the property, which is important. Not as important here as it is in some climates. Oregon in the valley is a very strange mixture when you think about it, of almost a Mediterranean style, very dry summer, very little rain for a long period of time, and that's been more and more the pattern. I remember when I was a kid, you'd get several good rains in the summertime, and we just haven't seen that these last couple of years. And thinking back and looking back at the records, it has genuinely changed. The microclimate for the valley has, from what it used to be. Talking to my mom, who's grown up here in the valley for, since the 60s, the memories she has of childhood was of milder, wetter summers, um, which makes a big difference. It really does make a big difference. We don't have the opportunity to have water in the summertime now unless you have irrigation rights. I do not have irrigation rights on this hillside, so it's extra important that I do what I can to keep it hydrated. So um, swaling is one step, mixed with terrace depending upon the slope of the area. Um, Subsoiling is another big step. And what that does is it takes that contour and it cuts a hole into the ground. I'm going down 24 inches, so 2 full feet. And that gets air to the lower soil, and it gets water to slow and stop in that area until that trench is filled. And then it will fill along the trench. Instead of the water coming down the quickest way to get off the property, which is what water wants to do, it will follow a trench line. And you can see there's a contour line right here. It follows around the hillside. So that will help keep the water on the property longer, and it will effectively pull water from the valleys, which are the channels where water likes to flow, to the ridges, which is very important. And if I do those rips correctly, those cuts for subsoil, that will substantially improve the forage, the grass forage, because grass can utilize quite a bit of water during the spring season to grow, especially late spring. But even now, some of the areas that have had more water are much heavier on volume of matter, organic matter, than the rest. Those goaties are just doing a great job of stripping those blackberries they have access to. They love those tender leaves, so that's why they're here more than any other reason, is to help manage weed populations, especially blackberry. So yeah, the last piece of the hydration question mark is, I may be able to get some irrigation rights from some ponds if I can get them installed. It sounds like I can get the ponds put in, but the irrigation rights are very questionable. So once the ponds are put in, even if I don't have irrigation rights, if I make them in such a way that they do leak slowly into the surrounding soil, so they're not a perfect seal, which is difficult to make a perfect seal, then the effect of that will be the pond will dry out over the course of the summer, but there'll be a couple of, a month or two out of basically second half of June, July, August, September, that 4 month stretch into late September, early October, where we don't get much rain. Maybe 2 months of that will have water coming out of the ponds onto the slope of the hillside and providing some continuing hydration to the soil, which will be very important for the plants and just changing the way that the landscape works. So that will be a big focus for us as well. So yeah, just a quick tour of the new paddocks and I'll try and get Smokey to come on through the gate here in a bit after we're done with the video. Another video hopefully soon. And I will try and remember for the next video that YouTube prefers to be horizontal, and that should hopefully increase the video footage quality. So we'll give that a shot. I may even do that today. I forgot that for this video, but still learning. Definitely not savvy with that stuff. So hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll get another one out to you soon.